Really excited today to introduce Rachel Baschieri. Rachel is coming to us from my lab, and she's going to be talking about matching biochar to soil management goals with the Atlas selection tool. Rachel?
All right. Hello. All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming to this technical session, Matching Biochar to Soil Management Goals with the Biochar Atlas's Biochar Selection Tool. As Kristin said, I'm Rachel Baschieri, and I work at the National Forage Seed and Cereal Research Unit in Corvallis, Oregon. And in this session, I'm going to discuss our efforts to expand the Biochar Atlas, as well as explain how the Biochar Atlas selection tool makes recommendations to users. So the Biochar Atlas started as a database and set of decision support tools specific to the Pacific Northwest, but now with support from the NRCS, we are analyzing biochars from across the U.S. and adding them to the database. And the tools featured on the Atlas site are becoming essential for implementing the conservation practice standard that includes biochar application CPS 336. So quick show of hands, how much of the crowd are biochar producers? Nice. I did a decent job in recruiting people to come to my talk. All right, well, I'll get into it. This talk is mostly for you. So as those of you with stockpiles of biochar waiting to be sold may know, there are a couple of limitations for growers to apply biochar. The first of which is the high cost, which is addressed by the NRCS's EKIP program, which provides funding to growers for implementing conservation practices. And the conservation practice standard, of course, that includes biochar with CPS 336. And if you didn't learn enough about it at this conference yet, I would recommend you go back to the recordings and maybe watch our workshop. On Monday, we did a CPS 336 workshop that was really informative, and Dr. Candace Williams gave a great rundown from the NRCS side. So the second big limitation is the lack of decision support that helps growers find the right biochar and application rate for their soil type and crop, as well as the right provider close to their location so the biochar doesn't need to be transported very far. And to address this, the Biochar Atlas was made, and it has several tools and resources that help growers evaluate the properties of their soil and how the soil could be improved with biochar, as well as tools for helping determine the application rates and estimating costs. So currently we are asking for samples from biochar producers across the U.S. so that we can analyze and include them in the database so that our tools will be more broadly applicable and we can further help in overcoming these limitations to growers applying biochar. And for this talk, I'll be discussing 3 of the tools that are being expanded with our US-wide analysis campaign. I'll start by focusing on the Select a Biochar tool and how this tool guides growers to the types of biochar that will provide them soil health benefits they need based on 4 categories of physiochemical modifications that biochar can make to soil, including carbon sequestration, fertilizer offset benefits, pH adjustments, and changes to particle size distribution, which is important for water infiltration and retention. So in order to guide growers to a biochar match, the biochar selection tool starts by collecting a grower's soil data. Then the tool interprets this data, identifies any areas where the soil could be improved with biochar, and based on this, the grower ranks some goals in applying biochar. And then based on these goals, the database is searched for biochars that can help meet these goals. And then finally, the benefits are calculated based on certain amendment rates. So now I'll walk you through how the tool is used. This is the start of the tool, and here you can either manually input soil data from a report, or you can use our Soil Data Explorer to find your location and have the NRCS soil survey data uploaded. So here I'm choosing the location of our USDA unit, and there's a lot of information: soil series, physical properties, moisture properties, and chemical properties. But then I'll go back to the Atlas and I can automatically populate the necessary information to use the tool. And next, we're guided through an interpretation of these 4 soil properties. So we see the soil at my unit has about 3% organic matter, which is high, but not so high that it wouldn't benefit from carbon amendments. And next, we see that the soil has almost no fertility, and we can change the crop, and the display will change based on the fertility needs of the crop. And then we have acidity. It's showing my soil has a pH of 5.1, which could be raised to improve the plant availability of soil nutrients. And finally, we have the moisture interpretation, which tells me that I'm sitting on a silt loam with a good balance of plant available water and drainage. But from experience, I know that there's actually a lot of clay pockets, and the soil could use drainage and aeration assistance. So based on what we just learned from evaluating our soil, I can make some decisions on how I want to improve my soil with biochar. So I'm going to set 3 goals. And my first goal was to sequester carbon because of the climate benefits and also because I want to get money from CPS 336. And then I'll set my second goal to, sorry, I'm not doing these videos well. My second goal is going to be to increase the pH of my soil so that the fertilizer I apply will be more plant available. And then finally, I'll select increasing increasing drainage of my soil as my final goal. And the biochar selection tool will search the database for the top 3 biochar that can address each of my goals. So for my first priority, which was sequestering carbon, the database selected the top 3 biochars with the highest amount of organic carbon that's estimated to persist in the soil for more than 100 years. The second goal was to increase soil pH, so the database has been searched for biochars with the highest calcium carbonate equivalence or liming ability. And, sorry, this is... and then my third priority was to increase my drainage of the soil, which would have the database searched for biochars with the largest particle size to facilitate more drainage. And then finally, there's a summary, which I'll address in just a second. But before I move on to the summary, I want to go through all of the possible goals I could have chosen and how the database would be searched for biochars that could address those goals. So if I wanted to increase water retention, the database would be searched for biochars with the smallest particle size. If I wanted to decrease soil pH, the database would be searched for biochars with the lowest pH. Not that that could actually actively lower your soil pH, but it wouldn't increase it. So if I wanted to increase plant nutrients, the database would be searched for biochars with the highest IBI fertilizer class value. So that's a value that encompasses potassium, magnesium, calcium, and sulfur. And then if I wanted to increase my soil's amount of one specific nutrient, then the database would be searched for biochars with the highest amounts of that specific nutrient. If I wanted to reduce salts, the database would be searched for biochars that have low salts, which would mean a low EC, and also a large particle size to facilitate drainage and leaching of salts through the soil profile. And if I wanted to reduce heavy metals, then the database would be searched again for high calcium carbonate equivalence biochars that could raise the pH of the soil and reduce mobility of heavy metals. So back to the rankings. To rank the biochar, each of the priorities are assigned a point value, so it's a really simple system. 3 points is assigned to biochar that meet the first priority, 2 points to the second priority, and 1 point to the third priority. So here we see the Oregon white oak is meeting my top 2 priorities, so it got a total of 5 points and is ranked the highest. And these poultry litter pellets also met my second and third priority goals for a total of 3 points, but because the hazelnut shells and Doug fir met my first goal, they also have 3 points, and for meeting my first goal are given priority over the other 2 poultry litter pellets. Now based on this, I'm going to move forward with the Oregon white oak example since it's meeting the top 2 priorities, and I can plug this into the Atlas database, not the database, the selection tool, and I'll be given calculations of the soil benefits that I can get based on amendment rate. So the next tool I'll mention that will be improved by our effort to add more biochar analyses to the Atlas is the Biochar Property Explorer. And this tool characterizes biochar according to the IBI Classification System. I'm not really going to get into that, but users can view classifications of biochar in the database, or you can input your own biochar data to find what it would be classified as. And there's also the function of being able to compare all the biochars in the database based on different metrics. So we have all of the IBI classifications, carbon class, fertilizer class, as well as liming and particle size distribution. But we also have other interesting metrics to compare biochars based on. For example, this SBC 100 value is the amount of organic carbon that is estimated to remain in soil after 100 years. And finally, I'll mention the find biochar function, which allows growers to browse biochar producers by map location. So this map allows you to zoom into a region, and you can click on a pin and information for the corresponding company pops up. And when we have analyzed biochar samples from a company, we can add a link here to their sample data. So you don't need to submit a biochar sample to us to have your company information added to this map. You can just leave me your business card and I'll add your company's location. But I still urge you to submit a sample so that all of your information can be available to people who are interested in applying biochar. It's going to make them a lot more likely to actually reach out to you. Now I'll go over our sample submission process. There's a submission form to be completed before sending a sample. That link is at the top. And we have a sampling process that we request be followed to ensure that we get a good sample. We call it composite sampling. So if your biochar is stored in a pile where thorough mixing is possible, we ask that the pile be thoroughly mixed and then 15 subsamples taken throughout. But if you're unable to mix the pile, that's okay. We just ask that you take extra care to take your 15 subsamples from different areas throughout the height and depth of the pile. And then if your biochar is stored in bags, 5 bags should be randomly sampled. So you take 3 subsamples from different depths within the bag. And it's important to get those different depths because settling occurs and particle size is really important. So smaller particles tend to settle to the bottom, and we want to get a really representative sample. So with all subsamples combined, the sample weight should be 9.8 pounds or more. And if your biochar is moist, it's really important that you give us at least double, because all of our analyses require the biochar be dried. And if I dry it and I don't have enough sample for all of the analyses needed, then I have to ask for more. And then that's an issue because it might not be like the same sample that I originally got. So for consistency purposes, it's best just to give us a lot of biochar. Then the biochar samples should be sent to me in Corvallis, where I process it, and I conduct analyses, and then I send it to our collaborators. So quickly, I want to highlight that the Biochar Atlas was started by my boss, Dr. Kristin Trippe, and these are our collaborators across the US who are helping us cover all of the sample analyses we're conducting. And with our collaborators, we are reproducing many analyses in triplicate, which will result in high quality data being added to the database. And as an aside, we are also using this as an opportunity to evaluate the reproducibility of IBI standard biochar analysis methods. So if you're a biochar producer, being a part of the Biochar Atlas is going to make your products more visible to biochar users, and sample analysis is free. All you have to do is ship your samples to us. Our analyses are not applicable toward USBI or IBI certification, though. So if you're interested, you can reach out to me via email or check out details on the Submit a Sample page on the current Atlas site. Again, this is currently hosted at pnwbiochar.org. That's going to change very soon to reflect the fact that we are expanding to US, serving the entire US, not just the Pacific Northwest. So this QR code takes you to our Submit a Sample page, and I'll bring that back up for my questions slide. But I'd also like to thank our partners on this Biochar Atlas expansion project, the American Farmland Trust, USBI, and the NRCS, as well as the Northwest Climate Adaptation Science Center, Northwest Climate Hub, and the ARS, who provided initial funding to the Pacific Northwest Atlas. So that's it. Thank you.
Congratulations. Okay, are there questions? Darren?
Thank you, Kristin. Do you think it makes sense to include sort of in woods produced biochars that aren't from a manufacturing facility, from simple kilns?
Yeah, if it's going to be applied to soil, I think it'll be good for people to be able to see what the physiochemical properties are.
Rachel, as it goes across the nation, if a farmer in Nebraska is doing this, they're not going to be told that the best biochar they can use is a Doug fir from Oregon, right?
No. So they're going to be shown all of the acceptable options in our database to meet their goals. And I think it would be nice to add a functionality of sort of limiting the search based on their farm's location, but I don't want to limit it too much. So I think most biochar users will know, like, okay, this is the type of biochar that I am going to look for based on the results from the selection tool, and then they can look in our Find a Biochar tool for that type of biochar and a producer nearby.
Building on that, distance is a factor because of shipping, as is price. Is there going to be something in there that says buy 3 yards of a very low-cost biochar instead of 1 yard of the very best, if it in fact delivers everything across the board better, or is that for you to sort out, the buyer?
So I'm more on the analysis side and not so much the economics, but we do have cost estimation tools.
So on the topic of consistent data and you know, wanting to stick to one sample, but I mean the producers are going to be producing over time, and so how do you know that the sample in the database?
Yeah, it's not always going to be consistent, you're right, as far as what our data say and what keeps getting produced. So as far as sampling consistency for our purposes, it's nice to have as consistent of a sample as we possibly can, because we're running these analyses and it does cost quite a bit of money, and these machines are really expensive to run. So if we get really wildly varying numbers, then we're gonna wanna run more samples. So if we can have a sample that is relatively consistent, that's good. And then if it sort of shifts in production where the results aren't quite the same as what we report, then that's just how it is. Nothing can be perfect.
And I'll just add to that we will have functionality where you can put in your own test results. The whole point of the Atlas project is to support the implementation of Conservation Practice Standard 336. And in order to qualify for that, you either need IBI certification or you need to provide a certificate of analysis to ensure that the char meets the standard. And so in order to do that, you can either, put in your own numbers or you can refer to the database, but it certainly isn't meant to be like, oh, this is a 900-degree char made from wood, and so this is the properties that you'll get, because obviously we can't control for secondary combustion or, anything like that. So,
so does the database include information from the producer about how the feedstock and the process that went with the data, and you can talk to the producer? And
yeah, so our sample submission form is where the producer is asked all of those questions. So we're collecting that data.
I think we have time for one, maybe two more questions.
So if I have previous characterization sheets, like from control labs, from previous biochars I've made, would you like me to submit them to the Atlas?
Yes, because we are interested in comparing, just kind of to see how our results are against these other labs, but we're not going to use that information for anything other than our own comparison internally. No, only our analyses are going to be posted.
And part of that is just that when you send in a soil to be analyzed, you can use the North American Proficiency Test soils to kind of do a comparison. There's no standard right now for biochar where you can take a known char and send that along with your sample to control lab so you have a comparison to know whether or not the data will be good. We're trying to come up with a char that we can send to people to use as that standard, but we haven't done that yet. So we just don't know how good the data are coming back from these laboratory reports, and that's one of the things we hope to find out. I think we have time for one more.
If a supplier's feedstock changes over time, could a supplier have more than one entry in your database?
If it's a completely different feedstock, yeah. So we're interested in different feedstocks and different pyrolysis temperatures. Okay. So if you have that, you can submit multiple samples.
I'll also say that Rachel will be down at the USBI booth throughout the week, or you can contact her at the USDA for more information. But let's thank Rachel one more time, and then...
Biochar.org appreciates the support of our sponsors, exhibitors, presenters, and attendees. We look forward to seeing you at our next conference in September 2025.